know Professor Daniel Roddick, Cynthia, and Larissa, right? Okay. Nice. And Professor Daniel Roddick is associate professor of the Florida Gulf Coast University in Miami, right? And your PhD was in Germany or from the United States? The United States. Your master was in Germany.
No, US as well.
Yeah, US.
My undergraduate was Germany. Yeah.
Okay. So.
You know what?
Anyway, so is Germany by birth, North America by profession, and Brazil in my heart. Right?
Yes, I know he's not Brazilian, he's carioca.
So,
it's different.
It's muy carioca. Yeah. Muito flamenguista también. São Paulo, you can say.
Okay, good. So, Daniel, he specialized more in mergers and acquisitions, cultural issues related to international business and mergers and acquisitions, right? And his works and articles have received awards as best papers in Academy of Management proceedings, right? Okay, so I think we have a lot to learn from Professor Daniel, not only in terms of the scholarly contributions, but also how to make this useful for managers. Because Professor Daniel Roddick teaches in executive MBA programs, so he tries to make all of this stuff meaningful for real life, right? So please welcome Professor Daniel and interact as much as possible. Okay, Daniel, thank you very much.
Muito obrigado, Jordi, great fellow carioca. So thank you very much for the warm welcome. I've been to Brazil several times, but never really been to FGV. I've been in Sao Paulo at the airport, but mostly Rio de Janeiro, Porto Alegre, Rio Grande do Sul. That's where you're from, right, Cynthia? From Floripa? No, Porto Alegre. Carlos from Porto Alegre as well? Yeah. And then Floripa, Florianopolis. So it's very, very nice. To visit FGV. To tell you a little bit about myself, and I do that for a specific reason. Jorge introduced me, doing more and more executive teaching for the past 10 years or so. So to translate all the stuff we do in academia to executive, and I'll show you some of the schools I teach at. One is, for example, PUC de Chile in Santiago, which has a pretty good program. This is, I think, very important for you guys, especially those of you who are PhD students, to think about, the practical relevance of the research you do, because we're an applied discipline, if you think about this, right? We're a very applied discipline. And I know those of you who are MBA students, you probably, see that as a very natural thing, right? To always apply the things you learn in business school, to your business setting. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but I tell you when I was born. You do the math. In 1976, I might look a little younger than I am. But I was actually born and raised in a country which doesn't exist anymore. Can anyone guess? Maybe some of you know. Maybe Cynthia knows because we've but what happened here and what country disappeared around that time? Does anyone remember? Some of you probably were
East Germany.
East Germany, right? It's the so-called German Democratic Republic, right? I was actually born in that system. So I lived there for 13 years. The wall came down on November 9, 89, and then East and West Germany reunited on the 3rd of October of 1990. So 1990 is actually the official date. So I was actually, 13, 14 years, I lived in a communist system, if you think about this, right, with a planned economy. I still have very vivid memories of how such a system works. And then I lived another 13 years in the combined Germany, and I got my undergraduate actually in Germany, and I had 3 undergraduate majors: international economics, finance, and marketing. So I know a little bit about those fields. And then I worked for a company called ING Group. I don't know if you've heard about them. ING Group was a big financial services corporation, and they were actually established in the early 90s after the European Union basically started a law or legislated a law that insurance companies and banks were now not allowed to merge. If you remember, insurance companies and banks were not allowed to live under the same corporate umbrella. And then Margaret Thatcher in the United Kingdom liberated this in the 1970s, and her big buddy in the US, Ronald Reagan, did that in the 80s. And then the European Union, as they always do, right? They wait for about 10 years and then they adopt everything which is wrong in the US and do it in Europe. And then in the early 90s, they basically started legislating a law that insurance companies and banks are allowed to merge. And ING Group was the first company which took advantage of this, right? So the biggest insurance company in the Netherlands and the 3rd biggest bank, they merged in the early 90s, 93, and then they became ING Group, and they expanded to about 60-some countries over a 10, 15-year time period, mostly through mergers and acquisitions. And I was part of some of that development, working with them, and that got me really interested in the international merger and acquisition side. And then I came to the United States and got my master's and doctorate. And in my research, I focused on how to integrate international acquisitions and how to deal with cultural differences. So I had that practical experience in a way working in the field. I had that research kind of experience in order to learn about this. And now, for about 10 years now, I teach about this also at the executive level about those, type of issues. Okay. So the last part of my life, I lived in the United States. So if you think about this, Germany is a social market economy. I know you all know what this is. So it's not a free market economy. There's a big social component in there. I was actually joking the other day. It just reminds me, I also teach in Australia. I'll be at the University of Adelaide, and then the person who coordinates my flight, I'll be back there next month. She said, "Oh, I'm not going to be there next month because I'm on maternity leave. They give me 15 months off. So she's going to see me in November, and she's not going to see me next year either because it's 15 months. She'll be back like in February 2020. So I see you like in 2 times down the road." And
she was what, 4 months?
4 months? Oh, a year, right? 4 months. In the US, by the way, you get 4 minutes. So I pop out the child and go back to work, right? So it's completely different. The longest one I've ever seen, by the way, is the Czech Republic. Every year we take our executive MBA students abroad, and I usually, when I have time, I'm on those trips. And in one of the years, I think 2 or 3 years ago, we went to the Czech Republic and Germany, so 2 countries, 2 weeks. And in the Czech Republic, in Prague, we talked to a woman who was a high-level executive at the Czech National Bank, the central bank of the Czech Republic, and she just came back. She just came back from a 3-year maternity leave. That was her second one. Okay, her second one. So she took 2 children. She had 6 years old. So if you think about this, social market economy is basically you have a lot of social components in the economy, right? Thinking about unemployment pay, thinking about maternity leave, and this is what Germany is. Germany only gives you about a year. And I think they cranked it down to 6 months now, but it used to be a year, and I think you can still get a year in certain instances. So, and then the US, of course, is more like a free market-oriented economy. There are not many economies to the right, maybe Singapore, maybe Hong Kong, if you think about this, but this is pretty much to the right as far as free market economies go, okay? So I think that over the span of my life, I have not only learned about and studied about, but really experienced, right, the personal experience, the entire spectrum of political and economic ideologies. The only thing I haven't experienced is a pirate republic, so I guess I have to move to Somalia at some point in time. So we can join me, right? With enough California, we can survive. Okay, so think about this. So that personal background, I believe, gives me, a unique kind of repertoire to kind of, reflect on certain things and how those systems work, not just teach out of a textbook. And so this is my work experience. I think I mentioned ING Group. I also worked for a bank in Germany. This is one of the oldest banks there. They were also this. Stands for Berlin, this stands for Hamburg, and this is basically Frankfurt. So these are 3 banks which also merged, and they made that big BHF bank. Merrill Lynch, I worked for them in the US, also in banking, and then a business consultancy. I was the president of this one in Germany. So my background is mostly finance, right? Corporate finance, and from an international acquisition perspective, I focus mostly on the cultural integration, and of course also target valuation and financial issues. Okay, traveling wise. Anyway, that's a food. No, I don't. Traveling-wise, so to give you an idea about my international experience, so I've been to about 80-some countries, and try to usually pick up trends, and that's what I want to talk about today with you. Talk about trends, about how to manage multinational corporations, talk about challenges and opportunities for multinational corporations, and many of those trends, I pick up, through my travels, and over the last 15 months or so the mid-2017 until now, just to give you this, and someone recently asked, that's why I put this slide together. So these are all the places I've been. Does anyone know where this is?
Yes. It's an island.
What's it?
This island.
It's an island. No, it's not. No, it's over here. No, it belongs to Chile.
Oh,
yes. Pasco, right? Rapa Nui, they call it. So some of those issues, and so when traveling, I usually try to, when teaching in executive programs or working with PhD students, to see, what is really going on in their minds in that specific region, rather than just, read about news about other countries through the filtered media in a way, okay? So some of those things you will hear about today, so I'm going to bring in, okay? So, and here's some of the schools I taught internationally. Right now I added this one because I'm here right now, but UPB, this is the Universidad Privada Boliviana. This is the top business school in Bolivia. I think they're number 20-some in Latin America. They're climbing very rapidly now. PUC de Chile in Santiago, I teach there every year. University of Adelaide. This is the Indian Institute of Management. I don't know if you've heard about this one, IIM. This is now apparently, arguably, the #1 management university in the entire world. They're better than Harvard and Stanford. I teach my international acquisition course there, and I can tell you something, the students there are amazing. I mean, if you think about the students, you start with a case study and they know everything, right? Because the selectivity rate is 0.5%. They accept 1 out of 200 applicants, and you have to do a lot of tests to even be able to apply, right?
So almost all students are not non-Indians.
Yeah, and many are not Indians. Well, there are some Indians still, but it's very, very selective. And the thing about IIM is that I talked to some of my students. They said, "Okay, what was your plan B?" It's like 0.5%. It's very, it's a lottery ticket, right? And I said, "Yeah, I was accepted at Harvard and Stanford, but I didn't want to go. I wanted to go to IIM." That's how they think, right? So this is a pretty good school. This is Abu Dhabi University. I work with their doctor program in the US. Jorge mentioned it at Florida Gulf Coast University. I'm a professor there. I teach in the executive program at FAU, and I do work in the PhD program at the University of Miami and in California, some stuff. But the idea here is that as far as managing multinational corporations is concerned, it is not the world we've known in the 1980s and 90s anymore, that the US is dominant and that US management theories are dominant. Now we have, and you're part of it in Brazil, we have the incredible rise of emerging markets, you have the incredible rise of technology, and that of course informs how to manage multinational corporations. So what I would like to do with you today, give you a little glimpse of some of the current trends and developments which I pick up on my travels, through my research, through my teaching. And how much time do we have?
Like an hour? 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock or so. Okay, maybe I'll just focus on some key things. I usually prepare a little more if we have discussion afterwards, but at least some ideas. Okay, so what I want to do is 3 things. So number 1, give you an idea about the importance of multinationals in the global economy. I think I can cut this short a little bit because I'm kind of preaching to the choir, because I think you all solved why multinationals are important. But I want to give you some recent statistics, okay, that you have an idea how important those multinationals really are. And then I want to flip over and be a little more prescriptive in a way to talk about 3 key trends from a technology perspective. And I know some of you are in IT, IS, supply chain management, right? We talked about this, so this is probably very interesting for you, because now some of those recent developments, think about blockchain, think about artificial intelligence, are now very common in supply chain management, but they will be very, very important for strategic management as well. And then talk about the implications, okay? So this is a little outline for the day. And then we have some Q&A. But please do stop me, okay? So I like interaction, so if you have any questions about anything, stop me anytime, okay? Rather than wait till the end. Okay, now think about the importance of multinationals. This is the latest 2018 Fortune 500 ranking, okay? Now, if you think about the combined revenues of those Fortune 500 companies, so the 500 biggest companies in the world, give me your best guess. What do you think are their combined revenues? Trillion? It's in the trillion range, yes, that's very good. It's a good guess. So about how many? What's the biggest company? Does anyone know the biggest company based on revenues, Fortune 500? Because when you talk about multinationals, and that's what I do with my executive students, give them an idea about how the world really looks like from a company perspective. So what's the biggest company in the world on the Fortune 500 list? Number 1.
Apple?
No. Apple is the most profitable one, but not based on revenues. Apple is number 1 based on profits.
Oh, expected profits, actually.
Yeah, so that's revenues, yeah. So, and
Walmart still?
Walmart, yeah. So Georgie is right. Okay, Walmart. And can you? I have it on there, but sometimes it's good to ask the question, right? The Socrates method, so to find your own answer. And if you're off, that's not a bad thing, right? But what do you think? What are Walmart's revenues per year? How much do they turn over? Walmart's revenues in a year? And they're not very international, by the way. Walmart only operates in about 33 countries. They have a lot of room to grow, right? They make about 70% of their revenues in the US. But how much do you think is their revenues?
Roughly 50 billion.
How much?
50?
50?
50 billion.
50 billion? No, that's much more.
It's about
400.
500, very good, 500 billion, right? $500 billion, one company, $500 billion. And if you look at the combined one, look at this, so $30 trillion, the Fortune 500, and half of this, so 1/60th, right? 1/60th of it, so half a trillion is Walmart alone, if you think about this. If you now look at this, and I try to be very, as much as Brazil oriented I could be, but look at this. If you look at the nominal GDP, that's about 50 times the Brazilian GDP, generated by 500 companies in the world. Think about it, right? Or 9 times if you lose purchasing power parity, right? And then this is about 37% of global GDP. So 500 companies make more than $1 out of 3 in the global economy. Think about how important they are, right? This is a topic which is really relevant. George, you mentioned we should be close to business practice. This is like one of the most important things, right? The rise of companies and how important they are. Think about the combined profit. So Apple is the most profitable company, $1.9 trillion, which is about the GDP of Brazil. Right? It's about $2 trillion in nominal GDP, right? So 500 companies, their profits is about the GDP of Brazil. And that's basically higher than the GDP of 185 countries. Okay, if you think about it, 500 companies. And then if you look at employees, they have a combined almost 70 million employees, which is more than the population of, or it's about the population of the United Kingdom. UK has about 65 million people, so it's a little higher. And it's more than the population of 174 countries. And we're just talking about a group of 500 companies. Think about this, right? So, and then, I looked at those statistics. So Walmart #1 with about $500 billion in revenues. If Walmart was a country, and this is nominal, it would be the 25th biggest economy in the world, by the way. They're bigger than Belgium, right, as far as one company is concerned. Okay, and then here what I did is, for you, and I just pulled this data, is that Walmart is about the size of Belgium. State Grid, which is a Chinese energy company, about the size of South Africa. Look at this, Sinopec, another Chinese company the size of Denmark, and you go down that list. Okay, and if you now look at the 100 biggest economic entities in the world, about half are countries and about half are multinational corporations. And that's how the world looks like right now. Okay, this is how politics are being done through companies, not through through countries anymore. Okay? So they become big international political players. Okay. Now, if you think about this, this is PPP. Just for those of you who say, "Oh, nominal one's not the right comparison," you adjust it for purchasing power. Okay. So then look at this. Then Walmart is about the 40. You see the numbers on here. I think the 40th or 41st biggest economy in the world. Right. If you adjust it for purchasing power. Okay. Now, if you look at revenues, okay, and look at the sector, look at this. It's dominated by energy. And the reason is because that is what's fueling the economy. It looks different. We will look at this now from a profit perspective, right? When you go to profits, the sectors look completely different than if you just look at revenues. Revenues just because the world consumes so much energy, so that's where the dollars go, right? Doesn't mean that these are the most profitable sectors in the world. Okay, and then of course you have some of the other sectors here, motor vehicles, one financial company, Berkshire Hathaway, and then retailing, of course, #1. If you now look at Brazil, there are 7 companies in the Fortune 500. And if you look at the sectors as well, okay, it's all energy and financial, right? So energy and financial. And you see that, and you have that one outlier, right? The food and beverages, right? All the food here which we need for our presentation. So, but think about energy and financials is basically the top 2 fields, and financials will resurface when you think about profitability. So let's take a look at profitability and look at this. These are the most profitable companies in the world. And let me just go one back. You have financials here, okay, which is dominant. You don't see much energy in there. And then the second one would be technology. And technology, you will see, this is the topic for today, that will actually resurface as far as the most valued companies in the world are concerned. And if you look at stock market valuation, which is very important, from a futuristic perspective, because stock prices basically count in what's going to happen in the future. All right, so they are forward-looking. Right, if you think about this. So financials will be very important when you think of it. You have the tobacco outlier there as well. Okay, now employees, real quick. Think about this. Walmart also being the biggest employer, 2.3 million people. And if you think about this, this is one of 51 countries. Okay, so if Walmart was a country, right, it would be the 25th biggest economy, and they would be bigger than 151 countries, 51 countries as far as population is concerned, right? So multinational is clearly incredibly important, right? Now, one of the things I want to do with you, look at the country distribution there. The 2 countries. And these are the biggest employers, China and the United States. If you now go back and we look at the biggest companies based on revenues, if you look at countries, China and the United States. 3 and 3 among the top 10, but given that China has number 2, 3, and 4, they're #1, right? They win that even though the US has the #1, but China has 3 among the top 4 companies in the world. Think about this, the rise of China.
They have 114 from the 500.
111. Yeah, so 111. So, but they have more than about 20%, and I'll show you this in a minute, Cynthia. So they've increased investment. No, no, good. You're thinking. I like that. You're like, there was a Jedi mind trick. You know where I'm going, right? Cynthia and I know each other for years, haven't we? So she knows where I'm going. So, and then think about Apple, right? Being the most profitable. Look at the country distribution again. Look at that. China and U.S. Right? It used to be only U.S. Now there's China. China is already the biggest economy in the world. I think you should know, right? Since the fourth quarter of 2014. China became the biggest economy in the fourth quarter of 2014. So, well, we started the fourth quarter today, didn't we? October 1st?
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is exactly 4 years ago, right? Exactly 4 years ago, China became the biggest economy in the world. Okay, and they have grown at about 6.8%, the US between 2 and 3%, which means that China has substantiated its lead, and they are about $3.5 trillion bigger than the US already, which is about the GDP of Germany. So China is basically the GDP of the US plus Germany combined right now. Okay, so and that's why you see with their companies. And if you look at this, and this is what Cynthia was referring to, and I pulled the latest numbers. I just pulled them over the weekend. The 2018 ranking, which is basically up to 2017, right? The 2018 Fortune 500. China has 111, right? 111 companies among the Fortune 500. Look at 1990. How many did China have then? Can you see it? Nada. Nada. Think about this. And now look at this. Now we have 111. And that's about the world population, right? About 20% of the world population are Chinese. And about a little more than 20% of the Fortune 500 are Chinese, now from zero. If you go to Shanghai, I spent a month there last summer in China, and I tell my EMBA students to go to China every year, otherwise they miss out on important trends, right? I spend a week in Shanghai, a week in Beijing, a week in Hong Kong, and then traveling a little bit around. And if you think about this, in 1980, there was not a single skyscraper in Shanghai. Now you have 3,000. And that tells you about economic growth. Right, and where things happen, where the economic music is playing, right? Not just the salsa club or samba club down here, right? The economic music plays in China. Okay, now look at this. These are the Fortune 500, the latest ones, and you see only Brazil has 7 companies. The rest of Latin America does not have a single company in the Fortune 500. And then look at Africa, right? Not yet. We'll talk about Africa in a minute because they're going to be on the rise. And then China, of course, Europe, and then the United States. Right? This is where multinationals are really active. If you think about this. Okay, now. Globalization does happen. I'm not trying to sell globalization to you because you know, okay? And the globalization basically happens in 4 different areas, right? And I call it the TEP dynamic. I made this up, the TEPP, but my students really like this, the TEP. So they remember T for technology, E for economic, and then double P, personal and political, right? So, and I teach an entire course on this. So for you today, we only have an hour. I want to focus on the T, right? The technology part. And then talk about what are the key developments right now, which we need to understand in order to understand how to strategically manage multinationals, okay? And as I said, you stop me at any point in time, okay? So let's talk about those 3 global trends. Okay, number 1 is smart technology, okay? And this is a word I made up, okay? Applicationization. I don't know if it exists in the language, but this is a short app, right? We have apps on our phones, so the word is app. Nicing, right? I don't know how you say this, right? So we're spreading apps around the world through smart technology. Number 2, blockchain revolution. Now, out of curiosity, you guys probably know because you're in supply chain management. And how many of you have heard about the blockchain technology before? What that is? How many? Okay, about half the room, a little more than half. How many of you would be able to explain it? By showing your hand, what it is. Give examples.
IT guy.
Okay, this is the IT guy. So this is very interesting, and you wouldn't believe how many people I come across who haven't even heard about it. I've recently, in March, so half a year ago, I spoke at a big supply chain forum in the US, and we had companies like Disney and SAP and General Electric and all those managers there, and you wouldn't believe how many say, yeah, isn't that Bitcoin? No, it's not. Okay, so people don't really know what it is. Think about this, right? And it's been around since 2008, okay? So it's 10 years now. I mean, the technology itself, the concept is out since 2008, right? When Lehman Brothers went bankrupt, a couple of months after it was published, right? In a white paper. And now slowly companies are trying to wrap their head around what that means. So I want to talk about this a little bit because I feel, this should be known more. And then, of course, AI, robots, big data, it's a very, very big field right now if you think about this, right? A lot of companies, Alibaba, you might have heard about this, right? The biggest retailer in the world. I mean, all they do is big data, okay? They're mining data in order to understand their customers better. That's what multinationals need in order to be competitive, right? And think about this, Brazil only has 7 companies in the Fortune 500. That's a way to be competitive on a global scale, how to really build a global competitive advantage by better understanding data than your competitors. Right? That's why I think this is so important to know about this. Okay? All right, so let's dive into those 3 and then we'll talk a little bit about the implications. Okay, now number 1, technology, of course, the internet, which was founded in the US. By the way, the United States is not the most globalized country in the world. If you look at those 4 tech dimensions I mentioned, right? Technology, economic, political, personal, they're actually very far behind on the other 3, but on one dimension, they're number 1. This, right? Technology. They're the most technologically globalized country in the world, the United States, because they invented all that stuff, right? The internet was invented, Facebook was invented, Twitter was invented, right? Now we regret Twitter because of that white guy, with the stupid hair in Washington. But the idea is that the US is really number 1 in technology, and that really is still sustaining their economic growth, if you think about this, right? On many other things, they're already behind, and we'll talk about this. When you go to China, you see that China, in many respects, is much more advanced than the United States is. So when you think about emerging countries, the US is emerging compared to China in many respects, right? If those of you who've been to Shanghai, and you've ever flown into the Shanghai airport, and you took the fast maglev train, the magnetic train to Pudong, to the city center, right, the financial center, it's a 30-mile trip, 48 kilometers in about 8 minutes. That thing goes 480 kilometers per hour, right? And you pay with your cell phone. There's no money anymore in China, okay? I mean, think about this. The US is so far behind. Right, Steve Jobs, may he rest in peace, came out with Apple Pay a few years ago. Oh, the best thing since sliced bread. Oh, the Japanese have been using this for 20 years. Right, since the cell phone exists, they pay with an FR chip, and then they pay for their train tickets. Right, and it doesn't really work in the US. Right, if you ever want to use Apple Pay, it never works. So, but they are doing it, the Chinese. Right, and we'll talk about this today as well. This is important for MNCs. If you think about how to make money, how to approach your customers, how to structure your supply chain, etc. Right? And so the internet clearly has become, and technology itself has become incredibly dominant. If you just think about the Fortune 500 again, we have 33 new entrants in the Fortune 500, all technology companies, in addition to all the tech companies which are already in there, right? And some used to be in there and they came back. Dell, for example, and HP, they're just remodeling their business. They're now restructuring. Then HP just came out with a really nice laptop. I don't know if you heard about that 360, which you can turn around in any shape or form. You write on it, which is probably really competing with Apple now, because Apple's become really expensive. Right? To buy an Apple laptop is like $2.5 grand, and HP sells it for like a fraction of that price, and it has the same technology in it. So from that perspective, they've come back to the Alibaba, of course, and Tencent. Have you ever heard about Tencent? By show of hands, out of curiosity, because I'm going to refer to this later on, Cynthia, of course, but how many heard about Tencent? A couple of you? Georgie, of course, about this. That was a good investment, by the way. They just had a profit warning. This was a really good investment. I'll show you about this. I've come across this company a few years ago in China, and this is the company in China which has the highest name recognition of any company in China. Right? So we'll talk about this too. Okay, so this is also talking about companies. Have you ever heard about Kemet? Never heard about it. I just talked to the CEO. The CEO, he's Swedish. He came to my executive MBA. And this is a company which owns more than 95% of electronics. So if you think about electronics, this is Miami, by the way, right, South Florida. And you see here is that all those things, this is a tennis court, and there's someone taking a photo. Each of those electronic devices you have, your cell phone, your iPad, your camera, they have, certain transistors in there, right, and consistors, which are kind of, little devices which are 0 and 1 when there should be power, when there should be no power. Okay, and they produce about 95% of those little devices. Which your car has it, your refrigerator has it, your microwave has it, everything which is basically connected to the internet or which needs power. And no one knows about the company, right? And they're located in South Florida, for example. He talked about this, right? And as technology grows, those companies will become more and more important and more and more successful, right? Look at this. This is how many satellites we have in space right now. This is how cluttered it looks like. So if you want to go on that first space flight with Sir Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic, which is going to take off next year, right, for a small fee of $250,000, you can be one of the first ones. They just auctioned off a ticket next to Leonardo DiCaprio for $6 million, right, if you want to sit next to him. And then that's what you see out there, okay, because technology works through satellites. Right? And you see that this is actually increasing. There's a lot of space clutter out there. Right? And they have a lot of political problems, which is not really announced frequently now, that the Russians, they have a little spy satellite out there, which is shooting down US satellites. to kind of disable them, right? So there's a lot of political issues with this, but this is what is fueling multinational corporations now, technology, if you think about this. Right? These are important global trends we need to be aware of. Okay, now if you look at the 10 most valued companies, stock market valuation, look at the top 7. What industry are they in? Apple, Amazon, technology, right? Think about this. So 7 out of the top 10, and Apple has actually broken the $1 trillion valuation in September. Okay, that was the first company which broke that. Amazon came very close, 994 billion, right? When Amazon was at $2,050 a stock, right? Amazon took off like amazingly, if you think about this, right? This is where the future is. Okay, a little exercise for you. I don't know if you've ever thought about this. The world's largest taxi company, and this is now, we're going into the future in a minute, but the world's largest taxi companies, they own no assets. You know that company. Which one?
Didi.
Which one?
Didi.
Well, Didi is in China, but they're not bigger than the other one you have. Uber is still the biggest one, but Didi is the biggest one in China, right? So Didi, think about this.
Didi bought a taxi company in Brazil.
Yeah, so Didi bought Uber, the Uber operation, because the government in China said no more Uber.
Yeah.
Right? Because the Chinese can do that, right? No more Facebook, no more Google. Right? If you're in Beijing, you cannot access 3,000 websites. You cannot get into Gmail, you cannot get into Facebook. The government doesn't allow it. So they have their own, right? Alibaba, Baidu, which they Google, right? Those things. So the largest accommodation provider has no real estate. Yes, Airbnb, right? Think about it. This will all be disrupted, by the way, right? This is already obsolete, what you see on that slide, right? You think, oh, we should invest in those. No. Blockchain will make all this obsolete. But this is what we're looking at. Largest phone company, Skype, right? Think about this. Anyone knows what that is?
WeChat.
How many of you know what WeChat is? By show of hands. 2, 3, 3.5. Look at this. We need to talk about this. Okay, we'll talk about this in the next. You need to know this. I'm not surprised because most people don't even know. The world's largest retailer has no inventory. Alibaba, no inventory anymore. Think about how that already disrupted business models. I think about hotel companies, Hilton, Marriott, they had to build up big hotel properties. They had to do with fixed costs, with depreciation, amortization of their property maintenance. No more. Technology kind of disrupts that entire business model. And now they are being disrupted through the blockchain, right? Which is the topic I'm going to mention. Okay, just a couple more. Most popular media owners creates no content. Facebook, there's other people who create content, right? Look at this. The fastest growing banks have no actual money. Society One is just lender to customer, right? They just connect people. They don't hold any money anymore. The world's largest movie house, no cinemas, Netflix. Think about this, right? Companies become big through technology, not through all those traditional business models and building a lot of assets and following this. The largest software companies don't write the apps anymore, right? We talked about the applicationization of business, right? It's Google and Apple. Think about this. They're not writing their own apps. They have those developers do it for them, and then they take a cut. How easy, right? You just provide the platform, and you make a lot of money. Like someone in the old days who comes up with a patent and makes money for the rest of his or her life, right? Just living off the patent. That's what Google and Facebook are doing, right? And Google and Apple. Okay, now, WeChat, let's quickly talk about this. And you need to know about this, because if you know about how to run multinational, if you want to be successful in China as a multinational company, you cannot avoid WeChat. WeChat is basically WhatsApp on steroids. You know what WhatsApp is? Who's on WhatsApp? Okay, if you go to, so some of you don't even know what that is. So WhatsApp is an application on your phone which allows you to text. Okay, but not everyone raised their hand, so that's why. Okay, so you know what? You're not using it. So what WeChat is basically doing, it's WhatsApp on steroids. Okay, so what they do is, what you can do is with WeChat, you can do everything WhatsApp does. You can text, you can send videos, you can send photos, you can call each other, okay? But what WeChat is also doing, and this is amazing, is that you use it as a payment device, okay? Now, Chinese do not like credit cards. And that's Alibaba started this, by the way, right? Alipay, you might have heard about this. When we buy stuff out in Brazil, but in the US, when you buy stuff off Amazon.com, you have your credit card to pay for it. And then you pay first, and then they ship the stuff to you. Because if the wrong stuff is shipped, you go to your credit companies, they give you a refund, right? You trust the system. China, they don't want this. They get the stuff, they want to touch it, they want to feed it, they want to play with it, and then they take about a few days to decide whether they want to keep it. And then they either send it back or they keep it, and then they want to pay for it, right? So no manufacturer want to ship anything to Chinese saying, I don't want you to touch my product without paying for it. And the Chinese said, we don't want to pay for stuff we don't know, right? We just got to test it out. So what Alipay did, said, okay, it's like an escrow account model, that customers deposit money in an escrow account, and then the manufacturer knows the money is with Alibaba. They ship the stuff, the customer touches it, said, yeah, I want to keep it, and then Alibaba releases the payment, right? Now, Alibaba now, with their new Alipay model, have about $500 billion in money in their escrow accounts free of interest. Customers don't get interest. WeChat built the same model, and I'll show you in a minute how that works. They have about $600 billion in their bank accounts, interest-free. So I thought Apple was smart to sell us a $1,000 iPhone, right? But they have to sell you something. They don't give you anything in return. They just deposit your money. You don't get any interest. Right? And imagine between Alibaba and WeChat, they have $1.1 trillion in their bank accounts, and they can earn daily interest. Just how much value they create on a daily basis just by having $1.1 trillion in their bank accounts free. It's better than a casino. And you could win at a casino. You just have the money sitting there, right? Without, this is crazy. So, but people do this. I have money there on WeChat. I have WeChat on my phone every time I'm in China. I need to have money, right? To go from places to eat food, you need to swipe it. You need to have money on your.
So you have money on our.
Yeah. I have WeChat. You have money on there, right?
You know how to do that, but they never take credit cards in China.
No, they don't take credit cards. So when you fly in, like I mentioned, to Shanghai, to that mark left train, you swipe your phone, and then it takes the money out of your WeChat account. And then you got on the train. You're hungry at 11 o'clock at night in Shanghai, and you go to a chicken place and you swipe it. They have a barcode on their chicken place. You said, there's a barcode. Okay, I want 2 pieces of chicken. I want a skewer. You click it, and then you online said, oh, you just bought it. I saw it on my phone. Good, go eat. That's what they do. That's the cashless payment. And that's why my prediction was, and I think that was about a couple of years ago, that China will probably be the first cashless society in the world. Number one, no one uses cash anymore anyway. Right? Number two is if the government says we want to be cashless, and every government doesn't like cash. Because, especially think about Brazil, you get rid of corruption, right? Without cash, because you can track everything. Yeah. Right? So if the government wants to, they can, because they're a totalitarian government, right? Whatever they say counts. Right? In Brazil, people could rise up, right? And say, when you have an election coming up on Sunday, right? You vote. But there's no voting, right? The government, what they say counts. Right? So I think they will probably be the first cashless society in the world. Compare prices on WeChat if you want to buy something. About 900 million Chinese are on WeChat. When you talk to a Chinese about WhatsApp, say, no, I deleted this 3 years ago. It's boring. Can use it as a payment method. Doesn't compare prices. What does it mean? So if you want to compare prices, you go to a store, and then WeChat tells you, oh, you can get it cheaper somewhere else. Right? Why do you buy it here? We'll buy it for you right now. Ship it to you. Right? And it's probably home, right? Because then they experiment with drones to deliver stuff. Amazon does that too. Right? In 15 minutes, you get your stuff in the US and some markets with Amazon drones. Right? Group prices. Right? You want to buy a nice watch? Right? 900 million Chinese saying, oh, there's 20 other friends of mine who are not friends, who are just on that same network. Oh, they thought about the same watch. Oh, let's negotiate with the retailer and you get it half off. WeChat does that for you. So when you spend full price, there are 20 other people who said they want that watch. Go there, in the next 3 to 5 days, and you get it for 50% off. Right? WeChat. Pay bills. They have all the accounts linked to it. Electricity bill, pay, order food in the cab. This is interesting. Time is money, right? You heard this? In China?
Yeah.
So you use WeChat to order your Didi, okay? You go to a restaurant. The restaurant knows where you are because it's real-time tracking. You see, your Didi cab. You order your food in the Didi cab, so there's no waiters or waitresses anymore. The food arrives when you get there. You sit on the table, they show you the table, and the food arrives because you know when you get there. You don't pay because they take it out of your WeChat account, and your Didi cab is waiting to go back to work. That's what China looks like right now. Think about this. Right? Think about this. How many caipirinhas you can order? So, think about location checking. Now,
I don't drink caipirinhas.
We can group discount, I guess. So, and then look at location tracking. Think about this. WhatsApp just introduced this in the US because Mark Zuckerberg, WhatsApp belongs to Facebook. I don't know if you heard about this. Facebook bought it for $21 billion. Right? WhatsApp a few years ago. Don't know the story? Yeah, they bought it for $21 billion. The guy who founded it, Jan Koen, the guy who founded it had applied for a job with Facebook. And Zuckerberg said, no, I don't like you. Okay, then Jan Koen said, okay, I'll do my own thing. He started WhatsApp. 4 years later, Facebook bought it for $21 billion. And Jan Koen got about $1 billion for the first 3 years per year just to stay around to kind of continue to develop the program rather than leave. Right? So he was probably happy to be fired a few years ago. Yeah. He would have earned $21 billion. But think about this. Now Facebook had crews. When I was in China, they had crews on the ground to learn what WeChat is doing to implement this at WhatsApp. And I was going to talk about this later. I'm going back and forth. for the sake of time. But there was an article I had my MBA students read a few years ago. It came out in 2014. Georgie probably knows. Called "Why China Can't Innovate." Can't meaning cannot, right? Written by Abramis, I think, in 2014. No, they can. Now they can, and they do. Now we go to China and learn what they do, right? And this is the nice fairy tale feel-good story in the US, right? We haven't seen China coming, and now we tell ourselves, oh, they can innovate. Oh, they can, right? And if a lot of US multinationals do have that mindset, that they think they're still number one. They're not. I mean, we're number two in the US as far as the economy is concerned, right? You can donate money. Here's the thing, that's going to blow your mind now, okay? If you go to China and you want to donate money to like a homeless guy, you think they accept coins? No, they have a phone. Look at this, they have a barcode printed out. In Shanghai, you go by and say, oh, sorry, sucker, and then you do like this, and you swipe your phone, right? And then you give them money. Like, look at this, you even have on that cup, there's a barcode printed out. Because everyone, and I've shown you how much I traveled around the world, everywhere I go, whether it's the desert of Muscat in Oman, or I go to the Basilica Cistern in Istanbul, or you're in Japan, everyone has a smartphone, right? You go to the United Arab Emirates, and then you have women covered up in black, but there's a white iPhone sticking out taking a selfie, right? Everyone has a smartphone. And look at this. And this is what the future is. If you think about how to manage multinationals, you've got to understand the technology behind that stuff. Otherwise, you lose out on business. You lose out on your supply chain. You lose out on your customers, right? Okay. Now, blockchain and artificial intelligence. How are we with time? I think my watch is 12:49.
Yeah, it's wrong. It's wrong.
This is wrong.
The room is available for us?
No, the clock is wrong. We
So
still have.
how much time do we have? I know Cynthia, who has to leave at 1 sharp?
We can make it a bit longer.
Can we go a little longer? You guys know?
Let's say
Okay.
1:15 or so.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so you let me know, okay? So give me a warning 5 minutes out, because I can cut things short or elaborate.
Very interesting.
So let's talk about the blockchain. And this is very, very important because the blockchain is not going to disrupt all the business model we know. It's going to disrupt Uber. It's going to disrupt Airbnb. It's going to disrupt what we think is now the big thing. Okay. And Uber, by the way, right now, if they would go online, if they would go public, if they would do an IPO, they would say that Uber has about a $60 to $65 billion market capitalization, which is ludicrous if you think about it, because it's an obsolete business model what they're using, right? But a lot of people still believe in it. So that's where the blockchain comes in. And I think there were only, how many of you knew it? 3, 4, right? A couple of you? Okay, so blockchain. Blockchain is the new internet, okay? So what is that? So give you a little overview. We had 1970s mainframe computers, 1980s PC, IBM, right? 1990s the internet came out. Then we had social media in the 2000s. And now in 2010s, this is the blockchain technology, okay? So what does it do? Blockchain. If you think about this, and, here's some information, I can send you the stuff if you're interested. But this is a completely decentralized network of computers, which is already running, okay? Which is not controlled by any central authority. And the reason for that technology is the financial and economic crises. Because what happened is, you might remember when Lehman Brothers went bankrupt in 2008, a lot of people thought, oh, we trust institutions, right? Institutions basically take care of our money. Now, big companies, which had a lot of retirement funds of people, a lot of savings, went bankrupt, and they lost their entire retirement. And they said, we don't trust centralized governments anymore with our money, because they're not really managing money well, they're not managing currency well, right? And there was a guy, Satoshi Nakamoto, no one knows who that guy is, right? Might be a person, might be a group of people, who came up with a white paper 10 years ago, who introduced that technology, right? And that technology initially was made for a new cryptocurrency called Bitcoin, but the technology itself has nothing to do with Bitcoin. And I always compare that, think about the internet, right? When the internet came out in 95, you had, the first application was email, if you think about this, right? AOL, some of you remember, Hotmail, which was the Microsoft email, and they had Netscape Navigator, which was the first browser, right? And Netscape Navigator doesn't exist anymore, right? Hotmail, AOL, I mean, if you have this, it identifies your age, they think you're 80 years old, right? It's like, oh, yeah, it's got my AOL account. Now you want Google, right? All those new ones where, you kind of, crazy as we are, we sign over our privacy rights, because I know if you have a Gmail address, Google can read everything you write, and they can use everything. I don't know if you know, when you sign up, you click that button, you read our privacy rights, and everything you write, we can read and can use, right? So everything you ever write to anyone is now public to Google, right? So, but think about this, the blockchain technology at the time would be the internet, okay? Bitcoin would be an application like email and Netscape Navigator. So applications come and go, but the internet still exists, doesn't it? And that's the same with blockchain. Blockchain will continue. It doesn't matter what happens to those cryptocurrencies because they're just one application of that technology.
Yeah, this is very important now where there are so many hackers in the world.
Oh, yes.
With blockchain,
Yes.
they can destroy a
Yes.
server, a database, and that database is replicated, you know,
Yes,
everywhere.
exactly. Right. So you cannot hack into one computer because all the data are stored among right now 6,000 dedicated computers around the world. Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So think about this is what Georgie said. Look at this. This is the traditional system. Right? So you have that centralized system. You hack into that computer and everything goes away. You hack into your bank account, they steal your money. Right? They hack into the social security, they steal your information. Here, this is completely decentralized. You hack into one, it's still existing on all the other computers. If you change the records on one computer, the other computers say, no, it's wrong, someone changed it, and they overwrite the changed computer. And if you think about one of the key applications now is property rights, which I think to some extent is an issue in Brazil as well. Well, you're the experts, but in the US, we're the most stringent, well, I say we, right? I'm not American, I'm German, but I lived there for 16 years now. So a very stringent enforcer of intellectual property, which means if you buy land, like my house, no one can take that away from me, right? Because I have a property title and I have title insurance, right? If something happens, they would kick in. Now in 70%, that's 70% of the world's property rights, okay, there's an issue. Either there's no title on file or it's on file, but you can easily change it because there's a new president and his cousin or her cousin wants to have that nice house. And they say, oh, we'll change it because I'm the president now. Right? They say, if you don't have a title, you have to give this up. Right? It's now my family member's house. And this thing will take care of this. Because once you record property rights, it cannot be changed retrospectively. Right? Because it's existing around the world in a decentralized network, which is not controlled by a single government or by a single authority. And this is what Nakamoto really wanted to do with his paper, saying we don't want one government to control one currency. It should be a decentralized cryptocurrency. And Bitcoin, by the way, went a little down today. It's about $6,500 per Bitcoin. Used to be up at almost 20,000. I started at 3 cents. How did you think about this? Right? And there will be only 21 million units. That's it. So the supply of Bitcoin is limited. It's not like the US, which is printing money. Right now, do you hear the printing presses? They're printing right now. I hear it. Right? Because they can. Right? And then you dilute the value over time. Bitcoin, you cannot print more. And that's what they say will basically stabilize that currency because there's only a finite amount of Bitcoin, 21 million units. Okay. So, but regardless of whether Bitcoin, I don't want to talk much about Bitcoin. We can do that in Q&A if you think about investing and all that stuff. Okay. But Bitcoin is just one application. Right? I don't even think they're real currencies yet. They're speculative assets for me right now. Okay. They're not real currencies. Right? You would be ludicrous as a retailer, you know. If you go to a bar and you say, oh, pay with Bitcoin for your caipirinha, you would be crazy to accept that payment, right? Because it's so volatile, right? If you think about it, it could be $1,000 less tomorrow, right? Or $1,000 more the day after, but you don't know. You're not in the business of speculating, you're in the business of selling caipirinhas or selling products, right? So, but the idea is that Bitcoin itself is an application, right, of the blockchain. But the blockchain technology itself is the underlying technology which will disrupt business. So how will it do that? Okay, let's take a look at this. So, I'll give you a practical example because I usually think that it's easier to explain the technology through an example. And if you don't understand what the blockchain technology is, by the way, guys, I wouldn't be too worried about it because I would bet that not many of you, except for the IT specialists here, can explain what the internet is. I mean, I want anyone to explain the TCP/IP protocol to me right now. But I know you're all on WhatsApp, you're all on Facebook, you're all on email, right? So you understand the value of the internet without really understanding how the internet works. And that's the same for the blockchain, right? It's not really important to understand the technology, just we know it's there and it will disrupt. Here's how we can use it, right? So let me give you an example. What do you think is the source of the largest flow of money from developed countries, such as the US, Western Europe, to developing countries? More than trade, more than foreign direct investments. What do you think? More than currency exchanges.
Internet, sale.
No, that would be sales. No, not sales either, Larissa.
Employees.
No, but money. It's money. It's a source of funding, not people. But people are involved.
The money will people send to the family.
Very good. Perfect. You hit the nail on the head, right? And then the technical term for this is remittances. I don't know if you ever heard about this. So every year from the US alone to developing countries, there are $600 billion sent by family members to their family members in other countries. Right? You have that maid, that hotel maid from the Philippines who sends money home to Manila, right, to her parents. Right? Because in the US, the American dream, they work, and then they send money back home. Right? Mexico, we have a lot of Mexicans who send money home. Now, how do you think they send that money home? Usually they don't have bank accounts because some of them are illegal. They don't even have a bank account in the U.S. How do they send their money home?
Western Union.
Western Union, right? This is like
I had a huge
you had to
problem
do
with
that.
Western
So if you are at Western Union, you make a lot of money, right? Because Western Union charges you about 10% between 8 and 12, right? And it takes between 7 and 9 days because they actually take ownership of the money. They have to follow all the regulations by banking. Then you have, I don't know, between 3 and 5 other banks are involved, depending on where you send the money, clearing houses. So it takes 7 to 9 days, and they charge you about 10%. So that maid who wants to send $500 home to Manila has to send $550, or she's sending $500 and pays $50 to Western Union, which is a good business model for Western Union, right? Think about this. Now, what does the blockchain do? There's an application for this called Abra. Have you guys heard about Abra? Does it be a blockchain? Yeah. I have it on my phone. Okay, you can download it right now. Not right now, later on. Okay, you do it later. So Abra is an app where you can now deposit real money, but also cryptocurrency like Bitcoin. And you can now send money to any other phone around the world using the blockchain technology within seconds. Well, it takes about 10 minutes because the computer network has to verify that transaction, okay? So what happens here is you send $500, and the average fee is about 1.25%, which is $6.25. And the maid doesn't have to take her lunch break to go to Western Union. She can do it while eating lunch, right? While eating that good food and just, hitting a button.
And you really avoid fraud.
And you avoid
I had a problem in Germany. Somebody just frauded my passport, and because you can go anywhere to withdraw this money from Western Union.
Yes.
So someone took my place.
And it's tracking it, Larissa, as well. You have a track record of how much money was sent, when it was sent, right? If you think about accountability, right? So think about this. So you sit there and you send that money. Now, what happened? George, go ahead.
I just going to give you the example of cement before this.
Yeah, the next one.
The cement company from Mexico. So the Mexicans, they didn't want to pay this Western Union fees.
Right.
What Cemex did is deposit your money here with me, Cemex in the United States,
Yes.
and you can use that same money to buy Cemex products in Mexico.
Yes.
So you don't have to pay any fee.
Right.
And of course, the products were more expensive there.
Right.
So they would buy bricks, tile,
Yes.
cement, and all of these paint and so on, but from Cemex, and they thought, we're not paying any fee.
Right.
And in fact, they were. And there was a guarantee the money for Cemex because they would sell everything for construction.
Right.
Right. So but now it's going to be it's obsolete now.
And that's called disintermediation. You think about this because you always have an intermediary behind that transaction who makes a big cut. And the blockchain will disintermediate a lot of business transactions, right?
Just a question because I never heard about Abra. So you don't need to add a bank account to it. It's all based on the
You can. No, you can't because you need to get money on that phone, right? So you can link your bank account and take money out and basically use your money. The difference is that Abra never holds the money. Western Union holds your money.
It's like TransferWise.
Well, they the technology behind it. So you transfer the money from your phone to wherever you want to send money to, and Abra never has the money in their possession. But Abra is the technology
it's
behind
not going to change considering the international legislation. For example, TransferWise,
there's no legislation for this.
You can use to transfer money. In Europe, it's like in less than 10 minutes you can exchange using TransferWise app to app.
What's the name?
TransferWise.
It's the same as Western
I used to use a lot of that with Giovanni, for example. So, but what happened is in Brazil, the Brazilian law requires 24 hours to make this transaction. So what happened is from Europe to Brazil, they cannot do it in 10 minutes as they do for all the customers in Europe. The money needs to get into the Brazilian bank and then be transferred to me.
I hear your point, but the difference is that they deal with cryptocurrency and the Brazilian government cannot control it. Okay. They control the Brazilian reais. So, but they control the Brazilian currency and the US controls the dollar, but they don't control the cryptocurrency. And Abra works with Bitcoin and the other Cardano and Ripple, all the other currency. Ripple is a cryptocurrency which was developed by banks. And they're not controlled by any government, right? And what you can do is with Abra, you can convert your Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency into real cash in another country, right? So what they do is now Abra, what they do is they have so-called tellers, right? Think about tellers. So what they do is, now I'll give you an example. So let's say that maid in Miami, right, is sending $500 to Manila, okay? on their phone during the you pay $6.25. Okay. Abra never holds the money. That money goes directly to their phone. In about 10 minutes, when the computer network verifies their transaction, 10 minutes later in Manila, they get a message saying, oh, you just got $500, okay, in form of Bitcoin. Manila, by the way, is the first market which allows this. You can actually send dollar amounts to Manila. But in the other markets, it's cryptocurrency right now. So what they do is it's almost like Uber, right? When you go to an Uber app, they have people on bicycles in Manila now with cash in their back, US dollar cash, bills. And then you say, oh, there's like a teller, a bicycle guy from Abra 6 minutes away. I want my $500 in cash. So then 6 minutes later, someone knocks on your door in Manila and they give you $500. And then they take that money out of your bank account in the United States, right? In a matter of minutes. Think about this. And they get 6%. So that's the technology behind this, right? And the 1.255% is basically paying for those little bicyclers, right, who run around. They get a little fee, right? It's not very expensive to labor, right? They're actually working out. You can sell this as a gym membership in a way, right? And charge them for it. But think about this. This is the new technology now. Western Union will go away. I talked about this actually in Bolivia last November, I believe, and in Santa Cruz, some of you might have been there. I took a photo with the Western Union store on the way from Santa Cruz to UPB, and I said, this store is going to be gone very soon. Right? Think about this. Right? These are the new business models. And if Western Union doesn't understand this and they change their business model accordingly, they will be gone. And not just Western Union, think about this, the Uber thing. How does it work if you call an Uber down? You call Uber, Uber is connecting them to their, with their proprietary technology to all the drivers. Then the drivers basically say, yes, I picked that person up. Where do you pay your money to? Uber. And when Uber started out, they kept about 75%. Now it went down because the drivers were rioting against it. So in the beginning, Uber kept 75%. They only paid 25%. That's why they have such a high stock market capitalization, if they would go public, right? They're not public yet. That's the expected market cap they would have, right? Now, why do you have to have Uber, an intermediary, if you as a customer could directly, through the blockchain, connect with the drivers, right? That the drivers are connected. You just need to have some type of Abra for cars, which does not exist for the IT folks. I tell my students, program it. You've got to be the first one. Got to be a pioneer. You think Abra is only successful because they're the first one, and you have to sign up a lot of people. Facebook is only number one because they have 2 billion people signed up. Right? They were first. They were quick. So if you build a technology now that you don't have to have that intermediary, which takes a big chunk of that money, connect drivers and customers. And do it through the blockchain that the drivers are verified, that they're real drivers, that they have a track record. Think about movie ratings. If you go to a movie theater, they say, whether the movie is good or bad, that you have people rating the driver, then you know whether it's legitimate or not. And then you can transfer that money through cryptocurrency directly to the driver.
Okay. Yeah. In São Paulo, taxi drivers have organized that through the, let's say, the mayor. Yeah, there's no intermediation now, right? The taxi drivers don't pay any fee.
Yeah.
Right? Because they are fighting Uber. It's not a crypto coins, right? But if you have a
it's the taxi drivers, right?
Yeah, taxi drivers with their own software,
right?
So there is, and then they say, how much discount you want?
Right.
If you want 40% discount, there are 10 drivers. If you accept just 10% discount, there are 100 drivers.
Right.
So depending on how long you are willing to wait, you choose the discount.
Right.
And the taxi drivers say how much discount they are willing to give.
Yeah.
So this is also disintermediation.
Exactly.
But a category of professionals doing that without crypto coins.
Right. And imagine this, now one program and technology for this, which is the Abra for cars, for taxi cabs, and you take a little cut, right, for that service. Right? You just got to be the fastest one. And you're not an intermediary in there. You don't even hold the money. You're not accountable by any government because you don't have any money in your pocket, right? Think about this. Right? So, and then there's so-called smart contracts. Enough for the sake of time, I want to talk about a couple of other things, but the term smart contract, make sure that you understand what that is, because this is one of the probably biggest applications of the blockchain ever. If you think about buying a house, in the US you need a realtor, right? You need a bank if you have a mortgage. You need a title company which signs for your title insurance that you really own that piece of real estate. You need an escrow account company because you put your money in an escrow. Then you have to look at the title company. They clear the title, and then the money is released from your escrow account to the seller, so you can buy it. So that takes a few weeks. With the blockchain technology, that will take a couple of minutes. Okay, because in the blockchain, through that network, you know who owns the house, whether the title is cleared. You can send cryptocurrency right away without an escrow account, because the second you send the cryptocurrency, the second your title will switch to your account, and it's yours, right? You can check on the legitimacy of whether that person selling you the house actually owns the house, right? So realtors will be gone if you think about this. And the blockchain will also tell you about housing market, which houses are available for what price, like with the taxi cab.
Now, think in Brazil with cartórios, the notary houses, they have political influence, of course, because they belong to politicians and so on. So how ever will they allow for that? So we have to go around this.
Yes.
No, the legislation in Brazil will not allow for this problem.
And right now it's not legislated, and you wouldn't believe how many politicians even don't even know what blockchain is. So how can they legislate it? And it's developing slowly around them. But if people are using it, and the more people you sign up, and the more the economy buys into it, you know, at some point in time, you will reach a tipping point that the politicians cannot do anything about it.
Remember, I talked to you, I met a colleague on my flight here today. So he's one of, let's say, those experts that train the Partido Novo politicians, right? And he's an expert in crypto coins and so on. He's training new politicians about the new, these new ideas, right? But of course, traditional politicians don't want to hear about that because it doesn't have, it avoids corruption, right?
Yes, so, and they want power. I mean, they're in the sake of regulating for the sake of regulating sometimes. And here they take power away because you don't have oversight over certain economic
transactions. It's also decentralized. You don't need anybody to regulate it. Right. Regulation is in this decentralization, redundancy.
Exactly. If you look at company examples, you can look at this. For example, IBM. IBM and hold on, now I lost it. IBM and Maersk. Have you heard about Maersk? I think I have to go the other way around. Maersk is a big shipping line. If you think about international trade, the Maersk. Hold on, here. I was looking for that button. The Maersk line, and IBM is now using the blockchain and so-called smart contracts because those smart contracts execute themselves. So I make it very easy, like, you know, what Jorge and I do, right? We do consulting sometimes. And then you work with a company and they pay you by the hour sometimes. So you have, or you have a phone call, right? Think about lawyers. Lawyers are on the phone with a client and say they charge you by the hour. Then you have a smart contract running behind it. And once the hour is over, money is being transferred, you have an agreement. Real estate, right? The contract executes itself. You say you deliver at some point in time and something has to be switched as far as property title codes. And the program does this. You don't need people sitting there in different offices and putting a stamp on it because this is one big network which records all of those things. Right? And this will and they're already doing it right now. Politicians don't know about this, but you know, the big companies are already signing up for this. And they're already regulating their own business transactions, you know, through those through that new technology. This would also open port. Look at that. The former CEO of DHL, you might have heard about DHL, big logistics company. He's also a repeated guest speaker of mine and a good friend. And he is now involved. This is a company in the Philippines now to basically use the blockchain for transportation, for logistics, because DHL is the biggest logistics company in the world, right? To avoid fraud, to avoid wrong deliveries, to make sure that the last mile is being recorded, etc. Think about it, right? There's another one, right? The blockchain in Transport Alliance called VIDA, right? Something you want to look up, especially those supply chain folks, right? And you learn a little bit more about it. Okay, now. Here's a couple of books. You know, I know for the sake of time, I want to just go to some implications, at least whatever time we have left. But if you want to learn more about this, you know, here are 3 books I really recommend you guys look into, right? One is called The Blockchain Revolution. One is called Ethereum. Ethereum is a completely different type of blockchain. This is the Bitcoin blockchain. This is the blockchain which runs the smart contracts. Okay, the smart contracts where you have those self-executing contracts in there, which is programmed by a Canadian guy with a Russian background. And Vladimir Putin met the guy about 2 years ago. We learned about this, right? Because he speaks fluent Russian as a Russian. So now Russia wants to implement this, and the city of Dubai, we had our conference there last year, AME, the city of Dubai by 2020 will run on the blockchain completely, okay? Because they have the World Exhibit in 2020, and they will run the entire city on the blockchain, right? How things are worked, the schedules about, you know, hoteling, the government, everything will run on the blockchain. Right?
Daniel, about corruption in Dubai, because allegedly it was very high also. A lot of money laundering.
Well, corruption there you can avoid because, well, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, the largest real estate companies are there. How come?
Yeah. Because the oil money pays off, you know, for certain contracts, yes. So, you know, the city, it's not the whole United Arab Emirates, you know, I mean, they can still deal in dollars, you know, I mean, they have offshore money, right, to kind of pay them off. They don't have to do it in the local currency. But
if you have to go there and invest, nobody's going to ask you where your money comes from, as long as you invest there.
You could probably still do that, but what they want to do is, you know, certain, you know, government transactions, you know, as far as the city is concerned, they're testing it as I think they're doing it as a PR gag for the World Exhibit, because they have that big World Exhibit and they just want to say, oh, we're doing now the whole city. But they can still do a lot of stuff. I mean, unless the entire world runs on the blockchain, there will always be opportunities for corruption outside the country in which the blockchain is being used, if you think about this, right? Because all the things are now national registries for titles, right? Think about the US property titles, Brazilian property titles, so that, unless the entire system runs on the blockchain, it's a long way to do that, but it's already making it harder. I think one of the key things is about currency, right? If you take money out of the circulation, like what I said with China, if you have a cashless society, that's the best start to get rid of corruption, because most corruption is in cash. Think about this, right? You're paying off in cash. Then to avoid taxes, right? In the US, they always say cash is king. When you get money in cash, you don't have to tax it. And that's the thing. So if you don't have cash, the government always knows how much money you've earned, and you have to pay taxes for every unit of currency, let's put it this way, right? So, but think about some of those books, okay? The last thing I wanted to talk about are artificial intelligence and robots. I'm going to skip this for the sake of time.
I think you can.
Do we have time? Okay, good. Okay, cool. So here's a good quote. Okay, here's a good quote. Okay, so take a look at this. The factory of the future will have only 2 employees, right? A man and a dog, right? The man will be there to feed the dog, and the dog will be there to keep the man from touching the equipment. Right? Think about this, right? From touching, messing up the computers. Right? Think about this. And this was by a guy called Warren Bennis. And it started like this. I don't know if you've heard about this a few years ago in Japan. This is Robina, right? The Toyota robot. This is Asimo from Honda. And they have like millions in Japan. It's an aging population. They have millions of those nursing robots, which are helping old people. They have those servicing robots. If you go to a hotel in Shanghai and you want something for the hotel to deliver, say, oh, I forgot my shaving kit, right? Then a robot comes to your hotel room and delivers it, not a person. Okay, so they're already there. So then, of course, now you have artificial intelligence, and now they say that robots will replace jobs. Very recent Oxford University study, 47% of all jobs in the US are now at risk being replaced by robots. So you better be ahead of the game, that you learn something and you're educating yourself something which cannot be replaced by a robot, or you're someone who programs robots or knows how to use them. Okay? And it's not only the low-skilled labor anymore. But when I take my executive students to around the world, in Munich, we went to the BMW factory, and they were blown away that there was no one on the production floor, all robots. There were people behind screens, looking at the production, but the cars were all produced with robot arms, right? And that's all that manufacturing, kind of low-skilled labor, if you think about it, even though producing BMW is not really low-skilled labor, right? It's a lot of stuff which goes into it. But now it's also highly skilled stuff. Analytics, big data, I'm going to talk about in a minute. Which robots I now can do, right? You heard about that Watson computer by IBM, which beat the chess player, right? The #1 chess player in the world, right? Kasparov, I think, from Russia. Think about this. So there's now that intelligence, the machine learning component, and that's what multinational companies need to understand in order to be competitive, okay? I was in early September, by the way, my friends always are happy about this, my friends in Rio. My birthday is actually on the Brazilian Independence Day on September 7th. And I actually spent one birthday in 2001 in Brazil. That was right before 9/11 on the 7th of September. And I flew from Porto Alegre to Rio. And the plane had, I think, 200 seats, and there were only 30 people in there. And I showed up with a Brazilian soccer shirt because that's what I got for my birthday from my friends. And then the flight attendant said, oh, you're nice, Alaman. I said, yeah. I said, oh, you have a wish, whatever you want. I said, I always wanted to go into the cockpit. I said, oh, yeah, you can. So I would talk to the pilot for like 45 minutes. 4 days before 9/11. I think it will never ever happen again, right? I sure we took, photos, not selfies at the time. It was like a real camera, like a Canon. The iPhone hadn't existed. So we were taking photos in there and all this stuff. And he tried to buy my camera, and I didn't want to sell it to him because I went to Rio. That kind of Brazilian. I want to buy a camera. No, how much? So I said, the plane flying. No one doing this. So, and the idea was, so this year, my birthday, I went to Las Vegas. I studied there as part of my undergrad. I studied at UNLV, University of Ireland. I met some old friends. And we went to a concert, right? That one night Jennifer Lopez was in town. We went to J-Lo concert, and we called a Lyft. Right? Lyft is an Uber. Right? Lyft is another Uber. It's another company. And suddenly a car, this is the photo. So a car pulls up, a 5 Series BMW, and said, oh, we work with Lyft. We're a company called Aptiv, A-P-T-I-V. And we are now testing self-driving cars. Would you mind, being a customer, because we want to introduce that technology to customers. So I would sit in the back, and there were 2 guys because they still had to have human people there, and then the car drove itself. And they have a lot of technology in there already. In Las Vegas, they do it in Las Vegas, in Philadelphia, and Chicago. They have several test cities right now, okay? So while we were driving, well, the car was driving, I had a chance to talk to them, and I asked a lot of questions. And so, why are you guys doing this? Are you still testing the technology? Yeah, that's part of it. We want to make sure to kind of buffer the kind of little glitches. But we want to create customer awareness for this technology, because a lot of people in the US say, oh, you know, self-driving cars is going to kill us, right? So, and they want to create customer awareness. In the US, everything is bottom up. So then once a lot of people sign up with this idea, then they have legislative movements and people signing, you know, petitions, and then the politicians, they have to do it, right? So you think they can't just say, no, we don't want it, because a lot of people don't want to know. So this was really interesting, and they had a fleet of, I think, 30 self-driving cars that night around that concert. And then, you know, we've seen them. You know, once you see those cars, you recognize them, you're more perceptive, and you will saw those, you know, that fleet of 5 Series BMWs around Las Vegas driving around, self-driving cars, right? So this is what artificial intelligence will do, right? Now think about Uber and Lyft. Think about taxi drivers. We may not need taxi drivers anymore. Google is testing their own self-driving car. It's a Google car which can pick you up. Why do you even want to have a car? Think about Sao Paulo. The traffic is horrendous. You're trying to find a parking place. It's just on your phone, the blockchain. You pay with your cryptocurrency. Your car picks you up, drops you off. That's it. Right? This is what the future will be. Tencent. Tencent was selected with 2 other companies, Alibaba and Baidu, by the Chinese government last year in October, I think, November of 2017, to be on the so-called Chinese artificial intelligence team. They have a soccer team, they have an Olympic team, and they have an artificial intelligence team now with 3 players. The stock went up. We were really good at the soccer at the time, right? And the idea was here that China wants to be a leader, and they sign up those 3 companies now: Tencent, Alibaba, and Baidu. Baidu is the Google of China. Alibaba is the Amazon of China, and Tencent is basically the Facebook of China. Okay? Because China does not allow these 3 companies I just mentioned from the US. They just said, no, we don't want you. Right? And then they explore that market. 20% of the world population, not bad, right? If you're a company which is admitted by the government. And they're working on artificial intelligence in China, and they're so far ahead. When I say of us, meaning the United States, but so many other countries I've seen. Right? India is probably close to it. Bangalore, right, is the IT hub of Asia. The Japanese are now really trying to generate economic growth, right? And then, you know, in some other markets, Europe is way too slow, right? The bureaucratic process, those of you who lived in Europe, you know, right? It's too slow. You know, if you don't catch this trend, you will be behind, right? And a study by McKinsey, when they looked at artificial, they said by 2030, it's not that far ahead, it's a very recent study, 70% of companies will have adopted at least one type of artificial intelligence here. Okay, yeah, it should be AI. Should be AI. See, AI. AIB is the Academy International Business. So AI, right? AI technology. I think I always wanted to be there. That's my academic home. And then AI, right? I have to change this. AI will deliver 13 trillion in global economic activity, right? By 2030. So this will be very, very big if you think about machine learning. And I'm going to give you some really cool examples in a minute. So here's some blockchain applications. And I think we already talked. Let's talk about implications. Okay. Now, I want to go back and forth. Okay. And then Jorge, you stop me whenever I'm done.
Now I wonder how we are going to change our business, our education business.
Yes.
Not to mention other business you're in, right?
So let's talk about some of those new business models, because Alibaba, you can learn a lot. They have a new business model based on ecosystems. But think about big data first, right? Since we were just on that topic, right? I was a couple of years ago down in Colombia and at the Universidad de los Andes, you might know, right, in Bogota. And we were talking to some of the folk with the University of Miami, right? They have a big center called the Center of International Business Education and Research, you know, cyber, right? Yeah. The cyber center. I'm a fellow of the cyber, so we went down to Colombia and talked to Los Andes. They had some questions about program building. And there was one guy, a lawyer, probably in his late 50s, early 60s, right, age-wise, who was hired by Los Andes to make sure that their online program they just started, you know, meets all the requirements. And that lawyer, we had lunch, right? He'd sit down with me and the cyber director. I have a question. You guys do a lot of online in the US. How do you get around the privacy issues? And we're like, what do you mean? Well, in order to have online, you don't have the students in front of you. You have to ask them for their name and for their age and for their experience, and it's all on our server. How do you get around privacy stuff? So my answer was, because I didn't really know how to answer, said, have you ever looked at one of your students' Facebook accounts? They volunteer everything, right? Where they eat, what they do, what they own, what they don't own, what they like, what they don't like.
What they eat,
Right?
when they eat.
When they eat, they take photos of it. So I don't think that millennials right now have any privacy issues with anything because they give that for free. Now, if you have a Gmail address, as I said before, you sign that whatever you write in any email, Google can use. They can read and use. That's your agreement if you sign up for a Gmail address. Most people don't know this. Have you ever wondered that, when you Google a flight number, see if the flight's on? Last night when I flew into Sao Paulo, I Googled the flight number, right? JJ8095, and then somebody said, oh, you're in seat, whatever, 1A, right? If you think about this, how does Google know that you're on that flight? You just Googled the flight, right? And the reason is because they see in your email that you've received an electronic ticket from LATAM, and then they affiliate their ticket with your flight. This is what big data does. There's no person linking this. This is the machine learning behind it. And saying, yes, your flight is delayed. And then they send you even a text message to your Gmail account if your flight is delayed, with you even telling them that you should do it, right? Have you ever searched something on Amazon.com? That's it. You got recently married, you told me, right, in Buenos Aires, right? No?
But so what? She got curiosity from marriage,
No,
so
have you
what?
ever looked for like
It's not a
wedding
robot.
dresses? For once on Amazon.com, suddenly every website you go to shows up wedding dress. Or you look for a watch, and suddenly you go to a completely unrelated website. There are programs you can actually use, I think called Collusion. One is called Collusion with Firefox. And you heard about Firefox? That it's a browser, right? And that's usually a very, very safe browser, right? If you think about, Google knows everything, right? The Google browser, stores everything. But there's a program called Collusion, which you can use with Firefox, that you see what data is actually being shared. So if you go to Amazon.com, what your search history, what companies that is shared with. So they give you a nice graphical depiction. Amazon is sharing with this company, this company, this company, this company, this company. And you'll see it's shared all over. So they build a profile of you, right? Machine learning now builds a profile of who you are, right? If you have a cell phone, which I assume all of you have, your cell phone every second sends a signal to where you are, so that they know whether you get a cell phone signal. So they can put a pattern where you are, where you travel, when you're home, when you're not home, what you do, where you spend your time. And that, of course, gives companies an idea about consumer behavior and what you might like. Think about Steve Jobs, right? Steve Jobs, may he rest in peace. He always said, customers don't know what they want. They don't know until I show them. And then he came out with the iPad, and he came out with the iPhone, and so he came out with the App Store. Customers didn't know that it even existed, right? The strategy we say it's a blue ocean, right? They created the blue ocean, right, where there were no competitors. And that's what artificial intelligence is now doing. They project what you might want. You don't even know that you want it yet. And then they sell you that stuff, and they sell it to you in a way that they give you the best discount at the time when you likely be happy and want to spend your money. Because they know your pattern when you're happy, when you're not happy, you're stressed when you come home, right? But you're spending your money on Sunday afternoon, right? Or Friday night after too many caipirinhas. Then you get your offer, 20% off. If you buy it now, you only have an hour. Oh, I can have more caipirinha if I save $20 on that product. Let's buy it right now. Think about this. This is what's going to happen, right? And if you as a company are able to understand this, you will be so much more competitive if you adjust your business model accordingly. Now, I'll give you an example. Do you see this, guys? I don't know. It's pretty light in here. You see this chart? I promise I switch it back on. I don't want anyone to fall asleep. This is data about a human activity over an entire year. Look at this, January through December. And there's an upswing in that activity around March in the spring. And then there's a little upswing here. And then there's a downswing again in the fall. And then it goes up again toward the end of the year. Can anyone guess what that is? It's a human activity. It's big data.
In the United States or?
It's worldwide. But the US, I think the data is from the US. I'm not sure. That's a good question. I think it is US based. But I think it's equally applicable in many markets around the world.
And it happens every year.
Every year.
Yeah.
Every year. It's not sports in the US. It's, oh yeah, it's the baseball playoff, right? And this is the football season. No, it's not this. It's also not shopping for Christmas. You say, oh, this is Easter shopping, this is like Christmas shopping, and it goes up. It's not one of those, but it's a human activity. Can anyone guess what that is?
Not the spring break.
No, it's not. You say, oh, travel. You could say travel among students, but this is the entire U.S. population.
Sleep. I don't know.
Oh, they sleep more in March?
Carnival.
Right? And they don't sleep in the summer?
It's not carnival.
Yes.
This is big data. No one knew about this pattern until big data found it. All business model would have never identified this. This is
on the internet?
no, that would probably be. I don't think there's a down. Well, you could say in like colder climates, in the summer you go outdoors, in the winter, it's cold. You could make that argument. This is Facebook data about breakups. When people break up with each other. Okay, because on Facebook you change your status, whether you're in a relationship or not. And they say, well, let's go to Christmas first. Christmas is too cruel to break up at Christmas, so they do it 2 weeks before Christmas. I actually had a good friend in Switzerland who was like a player in his days, right? Who had girlfriends all over. And he said, oh, your girlfriend had his birthday yesterday. What did you give her? I said, oh, I sent her a cruise to the US, right? So, oh, you're spending a lot of money. No, I don't have the money for a cruise. Well, how did you give it to her? Well, I told her the cruise is in January, and I know I'm going to break up 2 weeks before Christmas anyway. That's what I said. Think about it. So he already knew when he's going to break up with her. So people say 2 weeks before Christmas because Christmas would be too cruel. Also, here's a little blimp, right? April Fool's Day. They say I broke up, but I didn't. Right? This is a concern. Facebook blimp. On Mondays, it's because most breakups happen over the weekend, and on a Monday morning, the status is changed on Facebook. That's why there's an update on Monday. And then, of course, the spring cleaning, right? The spring break. But think about this, right? This is a very interesting example, if you don't know what that is that through machine learning and through analyzation of big data now, you can identify pattern in the population. You can identify pattern among individual people and then customize them much bigger. And if you adjust your business models, like Alibaba calls it smart business based on ecosystems, right? And there's a very interesting article which just came out at Harvard Business Review last month, which is the director or chief officer for the intelligence segment of Alibaba wrote that article, right? It was good for students. And they talk about their business model, about a smart business and ecosystems. And if you now find out about those things, which only big data can find, right, then you will be much more successful if you think about it as a company, right? The question, yeah.
The graph looks like high level of motivation in the beginning of the year and the high level of desperation at the end of the year.
Well, this is breakups, remember. So this means you break up here, but here you have good couples. The summer, everyone is happy. I think about this. But this is about, when they basically say, I don't want to be together with you anymore. And think about this now. When do you advertise stuff about, I have a student of mine, an executive MBA student of mine, who, after he graduated, he founded his own company, and in the first 18 months, he grew the company to have $12 million in revenues per year, $1 million a month. And what he did is he puts boxes together for single women, right? So for single women, every month, it's a subscription service. They get a box, and there's always some type of chocolate in there, something you can eat, some perfume, some socks, something else. And he gets that stuff very cheap because he has about 30,000 customers already around the world, in the US, and in 30 countries, so 30,000. So he gets all that stuff for a little price, right? Because like a little perfume there, they sell it for a fraction of the price because he ordered 30,000, okay? And they say, if you're single, you want a present because you don't have, a guy who gives you a present who comes with flowers. So every month you get a box and they open it, oh, nice. So he taps it. So when do you want to send out those boxes? Or a subscription idea, you sign up for this annual service. Right here, no? Yeah. Right here, right? After there's a lot of breakups. Think about this. This is what artificial intelligence now can do. And if you don't adjust your business model as a company, right, then you don't have much of a multinational corporation. Okay, what else do I want to show you real quick? I want to see. What I tried to do is, here's some implications. Hold on. Where's my... Let me just maybe do it from this perspective, and then I just jump through. Emerging markets. I had some. No, I'm back here. We talked about this. Emerging markets. I wanted to talk about a couple of things because I talked about China a lot, right? If you think about emerging markets or the global economy like a horse race, I always like to use some metaphors. Like, let's say a horse race. You've seen horse races, right? The gate opens and there's like 12 horses, and then one horse wins. Now, if you think about the global economy, that was like an unfair race because some countries had an early start, right? The United States, 1800, the gates opened, right? The UK, a little bit later. Germany, in the early 1900s, right? Japan, a little later. And now the gate just went open for many other countries, right? But the gate is now wide open for everyone, and because now the late movers can learn from the first movers how to run faster, how to run more efficiently, they can catch up faster. And one way to catch up would be blockchain and artificial intelligence, right? Don't use those old business models to run faster, right? Use those new business models to do your business. And, hold on. If you think about China is already doing this, and if you think about China, well, forget about those statistics. Look about this thing. Larry Summers. Have you guys heard about Larry Summers? The former president of Harvard, and he was also the former U.S. Secretary, and he was the chief economist. Is the chief economist. The worst thing that happened to the U.S. after 2000, right? It's not 9/11. It's the fact that China has become the world. We let it, that the U.S. didn't even know. And the example I always use is, and U.S. students, I don't know if you guys know, but do you know how many car manufacturers there are in the U.S.? The U.S. used to be the biggest car market in the world. Now it's China, by the way, right? But the U.S. used to be the biggest car market in the world, meaning the most cars were sold on that one single market. Do you know how many manufacturers there are? Not brands, but manufacturers. Can you name some?
Ford.
Ford is one.
General Motors.
General Motors two.
Chrysler.
What was it?
Chrysler.
Chrysler it belongs to GM, General Motors.
Okay.
Okay. So you have Chrysler, you have Ford, you have General Motors, and there's one new one.
Tesla.
Tesla, number 4. And Chrysler is not owned by US anymore, it's owned by Fiat, right? It's Italian company, they acquired it, right? So 4 manufacturers for the biggest car market, used to be, right? Now China took over the US just because they're bigger. Guess how many car manufacturers there are in China?
10.
10, Larissa? You think more or less? 15? 15? More than 250. More than 250. And they all have their ton of brands, right? They all have ton of brands. How many cars, Chinese produced cars, Chinese meaning Chinese brands, Chinese cars, not US cars produced in China, right? But how many Chinese cars do you think there are on US street? None. Germany, none. They're all around the world. You have them here, right, in Brazil? Chinese cars, Cherry and Great Wall and all those. I just go to Peru, go to Colombia, everywhere, Argentina, India, everywhere Chinese cars. In the US, they don't even know that they are Chinese car manufacturers to begin with. They don't know. They live in whatever world. Yeah, Tesla, let's have an electric car. China's already doing this, electric cars. Think about it, right? So what China is doing now, they have 250 manufacturers because they have 20% of the world population. They experiment, in the low-end segment, then they have certain manufacturers which concentrate on this, in the high-end segment, in the electric segment, the sustainable cars. And then they test those cars in markets like Latin America, right, or Eastern Europe, where the big players are not really interested in those markets. Think about it, right? And then they really make those cars so good that once they enter the US, there's no stopping them. Nothing what those 4 manufacturers can do once the Chinese come in with that big scale. And they've scaled their products because they tested them on big markets. Right? And this is what Larry Summers was trying to refer to. I saw a speech of his when he made this remark earlier this year. Right? The Chinese are not like the Americans. The US Americans are cowboys, right? They brag, oh, we're the best ones in the world, they run around with their belt, right? The Chinese are nimble and humble and they do their thing and suddenly they become big, right? Those emerging giants. Think about this. And this is what we need to understand from managing multinational corporation perspective, who our competitors are. It's those emerging giants in China, and I have some here. Let me see. Look at this. Some in China, some in India, right? This is the emerging giant, right? This is the US, the white guys, right? These are the Chinese, right? What's that movie, Rush Hour? See this one? You know this movie, Rush Hour, with Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan? Right? Suddenly when they went in, and the big guy comes out, right? And then the little ones are spinning around. That's what the Chinese will do with US companies and with companies in the Western world. Right? Another thing is, let me just remind myself, car manufacturers, airplanes. Chinese airplanes, they're building their own airplanes. Right? So that's why Air China is very scary because they explore, test out their own planes, right? With no track record. So I'm always very nervous on Air China. But we're thinking about this, WeChat and WhatsApp, we talked about this, right? Yes, China can in a way, right? Even though just a few years ago there was an article that they can. So the idea here is that these markets are very important. Africa, and I cannot overemphasize this, right? Africa is an incredible market, and the reason for that is twofold. Number one is they are now stabilizing politically. Okay, it's not you have that tribal warfare anymore. There are many governments now which are stabilizing. Ghana, think about this, Nigeria, which is a big market. Number two is that you have a lot of manufacturing jobs in China, and China used to manufacture most of the world's products. That a lot of manufacturing jobs are now moving out of China. And the reason is why they move out of China is that no one wants to produce Nike clothes anymore or Nike shoes for like $1 a day. If they can now produce or work for any of those 250 car manufacturers, or if they can produce airplanes, right? Because they can make more money. And I can tell you one thing, on my recent trip to China, I have seen more German cars on the streets of Beijing than I see in the streets of Miami. It's amazing how much money they already have. The GDP per capita for Chinese, PPP adjusted, is already $16,000. $16,000. Right? If they still live with their parents, they can leave BMW or Mercedes, and that's what they already do over there. Right? So Chinese are now, they want to consume. Right? China will move about 500 million people into the middle class in the next 10 years, so they can already consume, which means they have to have higher paying jobs in order to live up to their consumption. So why do the Chinese then want to work in factories for Foxconn and produce cell phones for $1 a day? So where do you produce all that stuff? So all the Chinese, they are now moving down to another market, and there's no other equivalent country in the world which has that many people. To give you an idea, in the heyday of US manufacturing, when the US was the manufacturing capital of the world, right, in 1978, the total number of manufacturing jobs in the US was 20 million. Right now, China, as we speak, they're moving 100 million manufacturing jobs south. Now, what other country has that population? India doesn't want it. They have an equivalent population, right? India is about 1.35 billion, about 100 million less than China. They don't want it. They want IT jobs. They want post-industrialization jobs. They want service jobs, right? They want people who program. We talked about IIM, students, education, right? And then the third biggest, or the third most populous country in the world would be the US, with 320 million people, right? And they, of course, started that outsourcing trend, right? A few decades ago. So where does China go with their jobs? Africa, right? And
I heard that there are a lot of African students funded by the Chinese government to study in China.
Yes.
When they go back,
Yes.
they become a minister, secretaries of state. They welcome Chinese investment.
Yes, and George is exactly right. What the Chinese have done for about 60 years now, right? For 60 years, they've been building bridges, infrastructure, roads, hospitals in China, so that they have a stake in that community. Everyone loves them. In Africa, everyone loves them because, the hospital was built by the Chinese, the road was built by the Chinese. They give us, the jobs now to own, little moped, and I can go on the road rather than walk my cows for 20 miles. I think about this. And I have a colleague who's also a guest speaker who runs a big Pan-African research and consulting company, right? And she used to run it out of South Sudan and Egypt, and she now moved her headquarters to Maputo, which is the capital of Mozambique, right? The Chinese now built a big bridge in Mozambique, right, in Maputo. And in exchange, they got the fishing rights off the coast of Maputo. This is crazy, right? If you think about this. So they're already building a lot of infrastructure over there.
Even the Africans, of course, they hated the Western Europeans for good reason. They hated the US for good reason.
Right, the colonialism, right?
Yes, but Brazil missed the opportunity because Brazil, culturally speaking, would be the best partner to Africa.
Right.
And we politically we missed the opportunity. Now Chinese will have nothing to do with common in terms of culture.
Right.
They have the best will.
They do it economically, right? They give them all the money, they build all the infrastructure, they train them, they give them scholarships, and then that's how they do it. And that's why China is 4,000 years old, right? Because they're long-term oriented. If you think about this, right? It's like good. Okay, guys. But look at this, right? If you think about Africa, now we talked about Apple Pay and WeChat, right? In Kenya, they have a thing called M-Pesa, where 25% of Kenya's GDP already belongs to them. Africa is not building up any landlines. Right, what Africa is doing, they are all mobile, all mobile on the phone. There's a cow app. Africa, I don't know if you heard about this, but in Africa, when you want to sell your cows, right, usually what they do is you walk there for 20 miles to a market, and you hope that you will find buyers for 20 cows. And if you only sell 16, you walk 4 cows back. Right? Now there are apps which brings buyers and sellers together. Right? There's an app which tracks the cow's menstruation cycle that you see, about the milking and new cows and all those things. Right? They're all online. If you think about this, all stuff we talk about in the Western world, right? So what I was trying to do is, and I know we have to finish up, and there's a couple other things we can talk about later, is that technology, the T in globalization, right? The TEPP, the T is like so ubiquitous right now, right? That if you think about new business models as a multinational corporation, you cannot avoid those trends, right, in order to be successful. And it could be a great opportunity if you think about is how to catch up. And you guys are the experts. Brazil, right? That's deliberately I didn't want to put a lot of Brazil because you guys are the experts. You live here, but this is a way to catch up with all those other companies which are already right, which are in front of that race because the gates opened earlier for them, this is a way to catch up. Because, being the first host, of course, you're sometimes complacent. And you think, oh, I'm number one, and I'm staying number one, and you forget about what's really going on around you, and suddenly, boom, someone is running by because they have new technology, right? Okay, so I don't know if we have time for Q&A. Sorry, I went a little longer, but I hope it was valuable.
Anyway, those of you who are going to the UNPAD meeting, who's going to the UNPAD conference? Who's going? So Professor Daniel is going to be our keynote speaker for the strategy division there. So,
Which will be this stuff. So if you go to AMBA, don't come to my keynote because it's about the same stuff. So, but maybe I'll talk about. I have some more stuff, and you can ask questions, of course. So yeah.
So then, very good, fantastic.
Oh, thank you guys.
And then the taping to the other students who couldn't come to see what they missed.
They were online. We had like
Online.
it was the biggest audience we had.
Well, really.